So, Parshat Toldot, and usually what takes the focus in this week's Parsha is the stories of Yaakov and Esav. This year, we discussed the story of Yitzchak in the middle of the Parsha, because when there's famine in Eretz Yisrael, he goes over to Grar, and he just goes there as the Torah tells us. However, once he gets there, HaKadosh Baruch Hu turns to him and tells him, don't go down to Egypt. The big question is, where did this statement come from HaKadosh Baruch Hu? There's nowhere even an intention from Yitzchak to go down to Egypt. Why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu even have to tell him not to go down to Egypt? What is that about?
And the interesting thing is we saw that those psukim are the psukim where we meet Yitzchak, where we meet Yitzchak's mission in the world, in our Parsha, but in the world in general, and who Yitzchak is, we learn from these psukim.
Exactly, we learn what Yitzchak is about, and we also learn a very, very, very important political philosophy for today's day and time from this week's Parasha, from the story of Yitzchak and Plishtim. You really want to make sure you take a look. Hope you enjoy it. So this week, Parashat Toldot, and really, usually what everybody focuses on in this Parasha is Yaakov and Esav, because they take the big part of the Parasha, the beginning, the end. But what I want to talk about this year is the story of Yitzchak in the middle of the Parasha, where in the middle of the Parasha, we see that there was a famine in the land, there was Ra'av Ba'aretz, and Yitzchak had to go look for food. So he gets up and he goes to Grar, he moves to Grar, a place where Avimelech is, where his father already, Avraham, had a peace agreement with. And as he gets there, Kadosh Baruch Hu turns to Yitzchak and says, don't go down to Egypt. And really, when you look at the psukim, Pshat level of the psukim, you have to ask, why does Hashem even have to tell him not to go down to Egypt? Where's that thought even coming from? Yitzchak got up and moved to Grar. There's nowhere that it says that he's going down to Egypt. And even if you want to say, well, his father went down to Egypt, well, you're right. His father, Avraham, went down directly to Egypt. There was a famine and he went down to Egypt. But Yitzchak went to Grar. He wasn't even going to Egypt. He went to sit in Grar. So what exactly is going on over here? Why did Yitzchak move to Grar? And why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu tell him, don't go down to Egypt? What is even the thought of Yitzchak thinking to go down to Egypt? Is there even such a thought? What's the story here? Why out of the blue does HaKadosh Baruch Hu have to turn to Yitzchak and tell him, don't go down to Egypt? There's nowhere that it says he's going down to Egypt. Yitzchak is in Grar. What is Yitzchak doing in Grar? Why does HaKadosh Baruch Hu tell him, don't go down to Egypt and stay in Grar? What is this story all about over here?
You know what's also interesting is this is the only story we know about Yitzchak. We have other stories with other people involved, and he sort of always seems to be the passive one in the story. This is the only story we actually know about Yitzchak. But if we look even deeper, we'll notice something else. Until now, Yitzchak is the one who's just following Avraham. As we said, he's very passive. Avraham takes him to the Akedah. Avraham sends Eliezer to bring a wife for him. He stays there. We don't see him active. And what we see of him is a great, wonderful thing of following his father's footsteps. His father, the great Navi, the one who God speaks to. And, you know, Yitzchak follows those steps. Not always do we notice that this is the first time that HaKadosh Baruch Hu turns to Yitzchak. This is that first moment. Until now, Yitzchak followed Avram's footsteps for a simple reason. Avram's the Navi, and Yitzchak is following his great father's footsteps. His teacher, his father, his Navi, his prophet, and Yitzchak tries to follow the great footsteps of Avram. And this is the first time when Hashem turns to him. And what does Hashem turn to him and say? Very interesting. When we look carefully at what happens here, and we compare it to the first time Hashem spoke to Avram, we'll see a fascinating comparison. Let's go back to Avram for a minute. Avram, we know, was in the middle of, with his family, traveling towards Eretz Canaan. They stop at Haran, and it says, Vayeshvu Sham, and they settled there. And then, suddenly out of the blue, Hashem reveals himself to Avram and says, Lech Lecha, go. If we jump over to here, we'll see the exact opposite. It says Yitzchak, it doesn't say Yitzchak went and rested and sat in Grar. Not yet. We'll see that soon. It says, Vayelech El Grar. He went. He was following Avram's footsteps. Again, Avram always was in Lech Lecha, going this place, going that place. Yitzchak follows Avram's footsteps. Maybe that's why Hashem expects that the next place he's going to go is also following Avram's footsteps. Avram went to Grar. Avram went to Mitzraym. Yitzchak is following those footsteps, is following the way of Avram of going. But then Hashem turns to him as he's going, Vayelech El Grar. Hashem turns to him and says, Shchon ba'aretz asher omar elecha. Listen carefully to that comparison. Lech lecha el haaretz asher reka. Go to the land which I will show you. And now he says, rest, shchon, rest in the land which I will tell you. What do you mean the land which I will tell you? You know, we discussed this by Avraham, meaning that he already knew where he was going. Yitzchak definitely knew where he was going. He's there already. He was born there. He lived there his whole life. He never left there. What are you talking about? Asher Omar Elecha. And we already explained back in Lech Lecha that the concept of Asher Areka or Asher Omar Elecha is not, I'm not going to tell you. It's more than that. It's a mindset. I want you to shift into a mindset where you're constantly looking and searching, what does Hashem want from me? And Avraham says, what does Hashem want from me? And is constantly looking for that. And now Yitzchak, it's your turn. What Hashem wants from you is not the same as what Hashem wanted from Avraham. Avraham, Hashem wanted him to be on the go, to be lech lecha. And we see constantly Avraham is going. Haloch v'nasah. You listen to what Hashem wants from you. What Hashem wants from you is shchon ba'aretz asher omar elecha. And what we see Yitzchak do next, vayeshev Yitzchak begrar. He rests, he sits. And the whole story from here on of Yitzchak is that. Yitzchak is the one who doesn't go and try to open a new place, doesn't go to look for the next thing. He goes, and we'll see this in detail. He sits. He goes to the same places Avraham was. He goes to the same wells that his father dug and were covered up, and he redigs them. He goes, he settles the land. He plants the land. Vayimtza Yitzchak mea sharim. Yitzchak, as opposed to Avraham, who's lech lecha, Yitzchak is shchon. He rests in one place. He settles. He searches deeper. He deepens his presence, his holding in the land, and through that reveals the water from the wells. Through that, he reveals the bracha in the earth. Not through opening new places. We always like to be Avrahams. It feels easier, to do something new, to be in a new place, to go to one, another. And Yitzchak is not about that. Yitzchak is about saying, I'm not going to open new doors. I'm going to take the ones my father created, and my lech lecha el haaretz asher reka is going to be shchon ba'aretz asher omar elecha. Hold on, deepen yourself, search for the blessing that already is in front of your eyes before chasing something else.
Very good, exactly. Maybe this is really the biggest statement that the Torah is teaching us over here. What Yitzchak is about. Yitzchak is, like you said, is about deepening that presence, that holding of the land of where Avraham was, of where Avraham was walking around. Now it's time to sit in the land. Shchon ba'aretz, gur ba'aretz. Be in this land over here. Be present in this land, because this land in front of you is now Grar, aval et kol haratzot ha'el. All these lands around, all these lands together will be part of this future Eretz Yisrael that will be given to your children, to your generations to come. And your job, Yitzchak, is to deepen that presence, deepen that connection to the land where you are, in order to reveal out of the land, to reveal what has to come out of it, the water out of the well, out of what's in that land. Your job is now to take it all out. And really, it's very interesting because, like we said, the Torah takes us straight away to Avraham, right in the beginning. Milvad harav harishon asher haya b'yimei Avraham. The Torah tells us there's a huge connection over here between the stories. And when you look at Yitzchak's story, it all sounds very familiar. He goes through exactly the same things that Avraham went through, but there's a very big difference between the stories. With Avraham, there were many stories. There was the story we go down to Egypt. There was the story of Achotiat, of saying, you're my sister, because he was afraid they were going to take her. There was a story with Avimelech, and then again, Achotiat, you're my sister. And then there was a story with the wells. Many, many stories spread around the Parshas over there on Avraham. All these together, all these stories together are brought together into one long story over here, into one place over here in the Torah, that is the story of Yitzchak that's happening now in this parasha. And again, like you were saying, Avraham is walking all over the place. He's like spread out, but Yitzchak is about deepening the presence over here in the place itself. Everything is happening, but in one story, because this is where he is. Over here by Yitzchak, it's all happening in one place. And really talking about revealing the land, this is Yitzchak's job, as we see, because he goes and he digs many, many wells. He starts off with the wells that his father dug and were covered up, were filled up. And it's very interesting because nor does it say why were they filled up. Because when you think about it, if there is famine in the land, if there's ra'av and everybody needs water, if Yitzchak finds water, then obviously everybody needs that water. So why are Plishtim filling them up? Why are the Plishtim covering up the wells? Don't they need the water? Don't they also need it? Why are they ruining it? But very interesting that the word the Torah uses to describe how the Plishtim covered up and blocked the wells is the word of Satmum Plishtim. And this word is a very interesting word because it means to cover up, listom something. But also later on, Chazal, they use this word stam in the meaning of no reasoning, satam velo piresh, that they did not bring a reason. They covered up the reasoning behind the thing. Stam Mishnah, a Mishnah without a name, a Mishnah without someone who's behind it, as we've mentioned many times, a name being a meaning. Maybe that's why today in Hebrew the word stam means no meaning, just meaningless, stam, because for whatever reason. And when you look at what the Plishtim were doing, again, it makes no sense for them to cover up these wells. So why are they doing it? Stam, for no reason. They're just blocking these wells because Yitzchak wants them, so they don't want him to have those wells. And that's the battle over there. And again, very interestingly, we only find Avraham facing that that kind of problem only one time. One time did he argue about one be'er with Avimelech, as the Torah tells us. However, in this week's parasha, we see that he dug many wells that they blocked. So what happened? Why does the Torah only back then mention that he fought only once? Because like you were saying, maybe Avraham was about walking around and moving from one place to place. And once he had a fight over the well one time, he just moved on. He didn't continue the battle with Avimelech and the Plishtim. He just moved on to the next place. However, Yitzchak, his job is to deepen his presence where he is. He can't move on. He's not moving on. He's going to fight in every single well. Why? Because they are fighting against him for no reason. Stam, they're just fighting. Yitzchak understands that, and he continues to fight them on the wells that his father dug and on the wells that he's digging now. And he's going to continue digging even though they're going to stop him. And he's going to continue, and then he's going to succeed. And once he succeeds, he's going to grow so big, they're going to want to get rid of him because he's so big, because they can't take it. And then still, he's going to continue growing and continue building. And then they're going to come back to him and ask him for a peace agreement. Once he's going to be so strong, once he's going to be so successful, that's when everybody around him are going to come to him and ask him for peace. Even the ones that are fighting all the time for no reason, Stam, the Plishtim, they're just fighting and fighting because they want the land from Yitzchak just so he doesn't have it. They're going to come around once Yitzchak is going to be so strong. Once Yitzchak is going to be a powerful nation, that's when they come around and ask for peace agreements, because they will see they have nothing else to battle. Sounds very familiar, especially today's politics, a political philosophy, but it goes all the way back to Yitzchak. It's not new. We've seen it over there. That's what's happening over there between Yitzchak and Avimelech. And this is what Yitzchak has to do over here. His job is to deepen the roots, to deepen the connection, to deepen the holding of the land, even though there will be those who will fight him for no reason just to get him out of the land. He still has to deepen his connection. And once he does, then they will come around to him, because a well is not only about water. As we know, a well is also a place where everybody gathers together. Everybody comes together. The well was always in the center of the town, in the main square of the town, because everybody had to come to there. And this is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu promises him in the beginning. All the nations around you will be blessed by you, by the water, by the well that you bring into the world, by the good that you bring into the world. You will bring so much good. They won't be able to ignore you. They won't be able to ignore the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's name is on you, and they will come to you and beg you to have peace with you, and then you will be able to sit in the land peacefully and be a blessing onto the world.
It's very interesting what you're saying here about the battle with the Plishtim, because really it's built into their name. Plishtim is liflosh, is to break into. It's not to lichbosh, it's not to conquer. It's just to break in. And we see this in history throughout the generations. Plishtim play this sort of role of someone who's always just there. They're always like just in the way. And we see that here with the wells. And it seems that the only way to overcome them is with a Yitzchak. With the mindset of a lech lecha, you're not going to be able to overcome them, because you have so many missions in this world. You want to achieve so much. You're going to one and to the other, and they're always going to be there in the back, messing up every step of the way, everything you do. The only way to conquer them is not by chasing them, and is not by going somewhere else. It's by being who you are and who you need to be. Resting in that land, as you said, building in that same well is what at the end brings them to come say, we want to come close to you because we see God has blessed you. That is achieved not by fighting, not by chasing them, but by settling, by yeshev. And it's interesting that the word used when Yitzchak goes and redigs the wells of Avraham is vayashav. Vayeshev begrar, vayashav. He returns, very similar word, he returns and redigs those wells. And thinking of these two sides of Lech Lecha of Avraham and Shchon of Yitzchak, it also connects us to the two ways we meet HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world. Because also when HaKadosh Baruch Hu promises us his presence within us, it shows up in those two forms. V'hithalachti betochechem, and I will walk among you, and v'shachanti betocham, and I will rest among you. These two aspects of Lech Lecha and of Shchon that we see by Avraham and Yitzchak, and we see by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, these two go together hand in hand. We need to keep breaking out of our boundaries, opening, creating, finding new places, teaching new teachings, but we also have to be able to go to those same places and repeat and stand strong at those places, not just keep moving when everything doesn't work, to hold on, to dig deep, and to find the waters in those wells that already were dug by Avraham.
Beautiful, beautiful, very true words, especially after what has happened this week in Yerushalayim. We want to wish from here to all the ones who are still injured, full, quick recovery in Mitzraym, betoch shar cholei Am Yisrael. And we'll just remind our viewers what we've discussed the past 2 years. So last year, again, we discussed the stories of Yaakov and Esav. What's really going on between them in the different stories in the Parsha? Because the first story of the Parsha, where Yaakov buys the Bechorah, where Yaakov buys the firstborn rights from Esav, is connected to the last story of the Parasha, where Yaakov takes takes the blessing, the bracha, from Esav, because these two words in Hebrew, chora and bracha, are exactly the same letters, are spelled very similar to each other. There's an intrinsic connection between the two things. We discussed those two parshas. There's some beautiful things in the Hebrew language that the Torah uses over there. The reference of ben, of a son, that is used by Rivka and Yitzchak to each one of them. It's incredible. You want to take a look at that video. Also, the year before, we discussed the story, why is Esav so tired? It seems that Esav is always tired. Something in him is tired because he comes from the field. Vehu ayef, he is tired. What does it mean? Why is Esav tired? What is Esav about? Why is he called Edom? Not because he was born red, but because he asked for the red soup from Yaakov. What is that about? We'll link that video too. And as usual, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to share it around with others and comment on the video below. Let us know your thoughts. Like the video, and of course, if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please consider subscribing and help us grow the channel. And Shkoyach Yitzi.
Shkoyach Tuvia, Bsorot Tovot, and Shabbat Shalom.
Chodesh Tov, Shabbat Shalom, and Mitzraym. We'll talk again next week.